Everybody, I'm Nicole, and we have another author spotlight for Beyond the Book Festival. Beyond the Book Festival is hosted by the Stark County Public Library in association with the Horror Writers Association, the Chicago chapter. It will be held at the Knox Library on September 30th. 2023 from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. That is Central Time. And then today's guest, I am happy to introduce John Vander Velden. John is the author of the Misty Creek series and has a I cannot talk today, literary blog titled Ramblings, Essays and Such. Welcome today, John. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so delighted to be here.
That's awesome. I will let you guys know John's having a little bit of a connection problem, so tolerate it, please, because we can hear you and it's just a lag on the screen. But other than that, everything's great. All right. John, can you give us a little background on yourself?
I'm a retired farmer. I'm living in northern Indiana most of my life in this particular area, Marshall County. A graduate of Purdue University, not in agriculture, but that's okay. And I have farmed for 45 years. And so I'm retired now, and I live here with my lovely wife, and until 2 weeks ago, our little dog. But unfortunately, that is now in the past. Yes, it was. We haven't gotten over it yet, but it is part of life, I guess.
You don't. I am so sorry for your loss. I am an avid dog lover, so I have two myself, and we had lost one a couple of years ago, and it's hard. They're like your children. It is. I'm so sorry to hear that.
This small dog moved into our heart in a way that no other pet I've ever had. And she was just sweet and always delightful. And, she was just, like I say, there's nothing like a good dog. And she was really, really a great dog.
Oh, yeah. No, they are.
Yes, anyway.
They're hard to replace, and they'll always be remembered. That is for sure. And I'm going to stop on that note because you're going to make me cry. I don't want to do that. But no, again, it is definitely hard. So how long have you been writing for, John?
Well, the story goes like this, Nicole. When I was in high school, I would write some things for to spend time in study hall or kill time or whatever. And that was but not going anywhere. But when I was a junior in high school, my language arts teacher had half the year in writing. And we were assigned a topic for a theme on Friday to be handed in on Monday every week. So let's say 16 themes. During that 18-week semester, I passed 2. The rest were zeros out of whatever score he decided. And when they handed them back to me, they looked like they were graded in a butcher shop. It was all red, And that was really discouraging. It was terribly discouraging. And I kind of gave up on the idea of writing until a story came to me, a very powerful story came to me around 2000. It's called Tree in the Meadow. It's a short story. I'm preparing it for a collection of shorter fictions. And I wrote that down because I couldn't help myself. I had to tell this story. It was so powerful. And I shared it with my pastor at the time and asked him, what do you think? And he says, well, what do you want me to do with it? And I said, just tell me what you think. And he told me I had talent. And that kind of like opened the door. And so I started writing because I've always been a storyteller. And so I thought, I have these stories. Why don't I write them down? One morning, the Today Show was on at breakfast. And here is this inspirational person telling everyone in the audience, if you want to write a book and you write 1 page a day, in a year, you can write 365-page book. And I took that to heart.
Yep.
And so I wrote for 7 years the draft of my first book. And it isn't published, it's a draft, but I learned from that I could tell a story on the page. And so in 2010, I started this series. I started it because I used to tell my wife stories. She couldn't sleep, so I would tell her a story in bedtime. And she told me at the end of the story I had come up with, called Rebecca's Eyes, that it was so incredibly sad, and couldn't I come up with something better? And so I wrote Misty Creek for her, with no idea that it would ever be published.
Wow.
And she read it and she said, this has to be published. And so that started the gears in a very different direction, because writing and producing a book is not at all the same thing. Excuse me. It's not at all the same thing. There's a whole lot of work in it that you didn't foresee originally. I was fortunate to have joined a writers group in Plymouth, a Plymouth area writers workshop. And the head of that group told me that, John, your stories are too good. They can't just sit on the shelf. So that gave me a little confidence. She also sent me to the Antioch Writers Workshop in Yellow Springs, Ohio for a week.
Wow.
A week of insanity for this man whose bubble of his world was small. I mean, let's face it, I was a farmer. You know the feed company, you know the chemical company, and the hardware. But other than that, and the people at church, you have a very small bubble that you live in.
Right.
And to find myself surrounded by intellectuals that had no more in common with me except the air that we breathe,
Right. Right.
was it was an adventure. And I don't know if I was really prepared for it. But when I left, that at the end of the week, I told this leader of our writers group, I feel like the dog that has had his head out the window for a week. I am actually in sensory overload. But I
Right.
made connections there that I didn't realize at the time would be so important, and they're vital. Yes.
That's awesome.
I don't know if I babbled on too long for you. Yeah. So,
You're fine. You're fine.
but
Hey,
basically, that's where I've started.
that's great though. That's awesome. Um, so I was playing around with your website, and I was going through and I was looking because I like to do a lot of research on people before I interview them. And I went through a few of your YouTube videos, and you have quite a few out there. It's almost like an online diary, which is kind of neat. Um, they're very well thought out. You seem to be pondering in each one. Do you think that when you do this, that you're just like thinking out loud, like an online diary, and then that way you can go back, you can replay them, and then like whatever idea was kind of in there where you were kind of just, going in a certain direction, just, random thoughts. Have you ever thought about going back at a later time and then taking these, so to speak, euphemisms and putting them into like a nonfiction book, like a daily thoughts type thing?
Uh, You know, I haven't. I started those, I call them virtual authors events, when we were all locked down for COVID.
Right.
And I just released a second book and had no way to promote it. And so I thought I'd give it a shot. I had no notion what I was doing when I started. And I do enjoy them. You do the prep work and this and that. And I don't have a video editor, so it's just kind of live what comes out. You try to control what comes out,
Right.
but and it has been a while. I told Jackie that I need to do another one just to remind people that I'm still here. But yeah, but I don't know. There's Nicole. I'm 71, and I understand that as I put it in my blog and other places, more water has spilled over the dam than remains in the lake. The time I have left is a limited commodity. And there's so many projects I would love to do, but I know that I'm not going to get them all done. And
You never
sometimes
know.
it's very frustrating.
You never know. You might live
No,
to be
you don't. You don't.
You never know that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you don't. But you don't. But you get frustrated when you say, well, I've got drafts for like 6 books, John, that I would love to get done,
Right.
And it takes me 4 years to do a book. I'm going chunk, a chunk, a chunk. The math doesn't work too well, Nicole. So I would get depressed. I would get depressed. And what I decided at last was I will work on what project I am now. If God gives me the time to complete it, then fine. Then when I'm through, if God gives me time to do the next one, I'll step into the next one. And that has helped because, like I said, I understand that I have enough health issues as it is that I don't think I'm going to make 130.
Again, you never know.
Yeah.
You never know. There are some
Never
people
know.
I never thought would, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wow. I mean, I guess it just depends on the person and, their genetics and stuff. I mean, there's anyway, yeah.
Really.
But no, I understand exactly what you're saying and trying to find time in the day along with life in general, because things happen. And I think that's a lot of where a lot of authors will have or people who want to start writing will have issues is just trying to find that hour or two a day to say, hey, let me write down 200 or 300 words, without letting the dogs out, or having to come home from work and then realize that the dogs got into the trash, or the kids are sick and stuff. And it's trying to find that time, and then God forbid, like people who would love to write like myself, getting out of that writer's block, just you've got all these ideas floating around your head, but then when you put pen to paper, it's like all of a sudden, I don't know, it all like disappears. It's like a wall goes up, and it's trying basically taking things day by day and see how that comes. So I completely understand as far as all that goes. Um, Going back into your videos, you did a reading on part of a story, and I'm really curious about this story. It's about a little boy whose mother had passed, and that you mentioned that he was heading to his father, sending him off to his grandparents in Westville. And I had to smile because
Yeah.
I kind of grew up in Westville. So um, it was, to me, that's what I love about local authors. Local authors, when you do read their work, you get little bits and pieces here and there of like areas that or things that you've done, or the schools you've attended, stuff like that. You can connect with that name or place. It almost feels like a little shout out that the author's doing. Do you think that by putting like certain local places in, that you're able to be I'm sorry, I can't talk today, you're able to connect with your readers on some level?
I really hadn't given that thought, but I'm sure that's true. Now, I used the Westville area because that period of time I used for that story, Severed Ties, begins in 1958. And I lived outside of Westville at 58. So I had a little familiarity with the town, and and the roads and the agricultural world at that time, because this young man is thrust into the farm life, and he's from the city. He hasn't a clue. That story is it's kind of, I love it, actually. I love the pretense of it, and that which the title says, Severed Ties. It deals with him losing his mother and his father sending him away, and this bond that he believes is broken. And in the end of the story, he finds it really isn't completely severed. And that's what that whole book is about. That's one of the projects that's on the shelf, Nicole. it's on the
Well,
shelf
I was
somewhere,
hoping it
then
was
I will
published because
hope to get to.
I would love to have read that.
No, I'm sorry. It's not. I'm sorry. I've
Darn.
got a draft. I've got a draft, but
I love where you're going with
my
it.
other readers are demanding other things. Yeah, it's it's interesting. I think because I touch on my background, and just like I tell other writers and other readers, if a writer tells you they don't tap into their own life experiences when they write, they're either unaware that they are, or they're flat out lying, because you can't help it. We are shaped by our life. And that gives me a perspective at this age point in my life that I wouldn't possibly have if I was a young whippersnapper like you. But you understand what I'm saying. Life, easy and the hard, shape us. And writers, if writers can put that on the page, not necessarily actual events, but that emotion. And I think I can in most cases. My editor thinks I can, so I'll trust her too. But our life, I have 70 years, and I'm sure I'm not aware of the first four, but the rest has been events that have made me who I am.
Yep.
If I can't put that on the page in a way that I share that emotion, that feeling, that my learning, then I failed, I think. I read something that if an author doesn't laugh when he's writing, how can he expect the audience to think it's funny?
Right.
And if an author doesn't cry while he's writing, how can he imagine that the tears will flow on the other side of the page?
Right.
And I have sections in my book. The closing of Misty Creek is a good example. I know exactly how that's going to come out. I wrote it. I imagined it. I've lived it. And I cannot read that and not break down. And so the readers who read Misty Creek become very angry at me because of the way it ends. But it's the way the story led me to go, and that's the way it is.
Well, what is that saying? You can
Babbled
please
on
some of the
again, I guess.
people all of the time. Or what is it? I don't know exactly how the saying goes, but you know what I'm
No.
referring to.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I have to please the author.
Right. Right. Well, and then,
Yeah, I have to please the author.
I can't tell you how many books that I've read where you think the ending is going to go one way and it goes a completely different way. And obviously, some of your favorite characters end up not making it through the story. And it does aggravating. And it does. I mean, I know that down the road, there's a reason why this person is no longer with them, or, things happen because if it didn't happen that way, I mean, you as an author, you do want to drag out that emotion with your reader. You want their anger, you want their tears, you want their happiness. I mean, because you wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't. Yes, you're going to make people angry. I mean, that's a given. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been mad at my favorite author because he killed off a character I like, but it's it happens. We move on to the next book, it's just
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So going back to those videos, and remember I talked about how it being kind of like a video diary, a video diary. Do you ever are those videos planned? Do you plan them out, or it's just one of those things where as you're sitting outside one day, you thought to myself, you know what, I'm going to do a video because the moment just strikes you? Is it just one of those things, or do you like literally plan these out of what you're going to say and what you're going to do?
When I was running those virtual author events for a while, one a month, I would think for a week or so before, what am I going to talk about on this month's video? What do I want to share about writing, about who I am, about what I'm trying to do, and life in general? if you read, I have a newsletter that goes out, and I talk a little bit about life in general, besides just talking about my writing news. And I will think of, well, this is what I'm going to talk about. And I will work the concept in my brain a couple days, because it takes me a while to set things up and get the lights where I'd like, and try to make it seem like I'm comfortable, which I'm not, but but make it seem so, to try to keep my name engaged. You know as well as I do, and I didn't realize this before I started selling books or trying to sell books. Most people buy their next read by the name of the author. You have a favorite author. I have a favorite author. You go
Right.
to a bookstore, you say, wow, there's a new book out by my author. I've got to have that book.
Right.
And this is all well and good, except for those of us that are unknown. My second book signing I did was in Napanee, and the lady goes through and says, I don't believe I'm familiar with your name. Well, I don't think you are, because you haven't read any of my books, because this is the first one. No, you're not familiar. Wouldn't you like to become? Wouldn't you like to become familiar? So, so yeah, but yeah, we're turned on by the authors because we know what to expect. I mean, we may not know what the plot will be or how it'll all turn out, but we enjoy knowing that this is the kind of story that you like or I like, and you know that before you even start. And when you have an author you haven't read before, you haven't heard of before, your friends haven't even heard of them, it's real hard for them to open the first page. And
Right.
so, yeah, oh, yeah. Like I said, the videos were to try to keep my name out there during COVID and thereafter, when I couldn't do real authors events and meet people, because I do enjoy meeting people more than I've ever imagined. So yes. So no, it's not spur of the moment though. It's not scripted. I work with like a 10 to 12 minute time frame, and those I record on my phone, and it has the clock to tell me how I'm doing
Right.
as I'm going. So yes.
Right. Can you and that's kind of, before I get to the next question, that's kind of where you and I were talking beforehand before we started the interview, on kind of like how the book festival is, how I want to how I want the book festival perceived, is that you know, we are trying, or I personally am trying, and this is the idea that I want to get out there to everybody, is that there are so many authors out there that are so talented, but unfortunately haven't gotten that big break that they need, to where, they're going to be, their name is out there and everybody knows who they are and stuff, kind of like what you were referring to. But on another level, I mean, yeah, you guys have to sell yourself. You have to sell yourself. You have to sell your work. How do you do that? You have it, you go to these book festivals, these book signings, these author events and stuff like that. But personally, what I have learned over the years is that, yes, I mean, don't get me wrong, I have a TBR list that is 20 miles long. There's so many books on there that I know I will never read in my lifetime. I'm trying. But when I personally meet an author, and I talk to them and I get to know how, they are as a person. I mean, granted, you can't do that in 5 to 10 minutes, but I mean, if there's some kind of connection, if there is, some kind of interest, or even the story, something that you never would have considered before, I will give that author a chance. I will purchase their books. And then come to find out, when I do more research on these authors, that they have more than one book, that they have, websites and blogs and video blogs like you. That I want to know more, like the story about the boy in Westville. I want to know more about this story. So it's kind of one of those things where, now that I have met you and talked to you, and yes, I've read your articles and your interviews and all that stuff, but actually physically, I guess virtually, speaking to you, I would like to know more. I would like to read your books. I want to read Misty Creek. And that's, like I said, that's the whole premise of this book festival is authors that I know personally, or I have read their work, or I have friends who have said, Nicole, read these people, or Nicole, I can't tell you my authors that are coming that my friends have read that said, you're having this person there, and they're all excited. And then they share that with me. And it's going back to word of mouth and saying, I've read this person, or I met this person, and this person's great. Again, it goes back to, getting your name out, getting your work out, and letting people know that there are others. I'm not, and it's nothing against the bigger name authors that are they're worldwide known, because I love their work
No,
too. But it's just one of those things where you just want to give the little guy a chance, because the little guy, you guys, I'm telling you, the little guy, there are so many stories out there that you would have never have known about, unless someone, like, we had a festival, or watching like those indie movies, or reading, these little known names and of authors. It's just, I know I'm rambling and I apologize, but again, it's
no,
me
don't
trying to get
apologize.
my point across that try the little guys. You would really be amazed about, the work that's out there. And Mr. Vander Velden, he does. I've read a couple of his short stories. He does. He's pretty talented, and I can't express enough that you guys should give Misty Creek a chance. We actually got the series in here at the library, um, and check it out. Read it, because it seems like it's a really good story. And I can't wait to read my copy if it ever comes back into the library, because it is checked out right now. I'm just letting you know, John. It's popular.
Well,
But
you may bump into a copy or two in a couple weeks,
I'm
a
telling you,
week
you
and a
never
half.
know. You never know. Um, However, going into Misty Creek, why don't you give us a little idea of what that's about?
When I start a story, a book length story, I start with a simple concept. In Misty Creek, it was that she was left standing at the altar when she was getting married,
Oh, goodness.
and that's not a rare base for a story. I mean, I'm told it's too simple. Well, we have to add a little to it. When you think about that, then you add on to it that, well, she worked 7 years teaching school to pay for her fiance's education,
Oh my.
and then have him run off with her best friend. That now we've added a little tension to it,
Oh
right?
my goodness.
So then she's so upset. She's upset, and so she finds this teaching position in Kansas. And now she is the daughter of a banker in Columbus, Ohio. And so she has taught in rural areas of Ohio, but she's certain she knows that Kansas can't be so different, but it is very different. And so she goes west to teach school in this community, and she brings with her an attitude. She is a person that was hurt deeply. And even though she feels she carries a piece of the blame for that, she can't help but blame the male gender in general. And she carries that attitude with her at the beginning of the story. And she butts heads with the other character throughout the book. Now, that's kind of where it starts. And I created this entire country, I mean, this entire universe that doesn't exist in Kansas. And I was hoping to set foot for the first time in Kansas in my life this summer, but that travel plans fell through. So I have not yet set foot in Kansas. But growing up with Little House on the Prairie, growing up with this type of Western, it gave me an idea of the environment that I was creating. And the life that she lived in this area for this teaching term. And so, yeah, she goes west and she teaches school in a little one-room schoolhouse on the edge of a lake. And she has some incredible adventures and some difficulties and some threats. There's a little danger in there.
Oh,
So that pretty well, yeah.
some intrigue.
Anyway, her her feelings about the male gender evolve during this book. So yeah. Yeah. When I wrote the draft, the original draft was for the first two books, which I didn't realize it when I wrote it, but it was too long. And at Jackie's insistence, I split it into two books. So then I thought those two books would tell the entire story. At the end of the when my readers got into the second book, they were hammering that I had to continue, and so there came the third book, which is a big book. It's 650 some pages. It's
Wow.
huge.
No wonder it
Yes,
took you
it's
4 years.
yes. And so
It's an epic.
so then I thought, well, but the trouble with the third book was it left it wide open for a fourth. So
Oh.
so now so the fourth is underway. Like I said to you earlier, it's come back from the editor for its first editorial review, and I know I've got a lot of work to do on that. It's at least a year away, but I am kind of excited about the fourth book. And yeah, and so it goes. The series, I could run the series for the rest of my life, but I have other projects I would really love to do, and so I'm hoping to finish the series in the fifth book. But
I see what you're
whether they're
saying. You don't want
allowed
to.
to do that,
You don't want to leave everybody hanging.
yeah. Well, yeah, you know, I try to be polite. It's not always easy. It's not always easy, but I try
Like
to be polite.
what was it? Sue Grafton. Unfortunately, Sue wasn't able to finish her series. I think she ended her series, and why she did pass before she could finish the alphabet. Um, and I'm not saying that's going to happen to you in the middle of your Mystery Creek series. I'm not saying
No,
that,
no,
but
no.
it's just it tends to happen, unfortunately. But yeah, no, it would be. And again, that knowing that, I see where you're coming from, is because we had spoken about that earlier, that you were afraid that you didn't have enough time to finish that, and I completely said you're going to be 130. You're going to have plenty of time to read, to write all this stuff, and we're all going to know what happens. So, but I will let you know that we are out of time. But it has been a pleasure. I did enjoy speaking with you very much. I can't wait to meet you in person at the Beyond the Book Festival. Everybody, John Vander Velden will be here from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. On September 30th of this year, 2023. I encourage you to come out to look over his work, to speak with him, because yes, he is a storyteller. And he is a pleasure to speak with. And I, for one, like I said, I can't wait to meet you. And thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll see you guys there.
Thank you for having me.